Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So, are you still considering moving to the Tampa St. Pete area? Well, before you book those movers, there are a few things we need to talk about that may change your mind. So in this video, we're going to be going over the 7 reasons why you may not want to move to Tampa. Now, I don't share this with you to scare you. It's meant to prepare you because let's be honest, there is no perfect place. And Tampa, like any city, has its challenges. So let's talk about those challenges right now. All right, so let's start with the elephant in the room, which is hurricanes and weather, because that seems to be the biggest topic that I get asked about when people are looking to relocate to our area, and for good reason. Last year in 2024, we had 2 huge hurricanes. So it is a big topic and discussion that I'm having with a lot of my clients. And so that might not be for you, but the first thing you have to understand is when is our storm season? So our storm season here usually runs from June 1st to November 30th, give or take, with a peak season anywhere around August to October. Again, if you can imagine the big heat happening within the Gulf of Mexico and then having, the cool weather coming in, it's a perfect storm, no pun intended. So what you're going to have to understand is that sometimes it's not a hurricane that's going to give you a lot of damage. It can just be a tropical storm, or just our normal rainy season can dump lots of water. And I was just talking to a client the other day about the Lakeland area and how, it's high and dry. Well, guess what? Right next door to it is Plant City. And Plant City, after one of our rainstorms, had about 9 inches of rain. Now that dissipated, it had a place to go, but you can still see storm surges and lots of water being dumped with these normal storms periodically. And so it's going to be really hard to escape a hurricane, a tropical storm, or even just some of our major weather patterns that are going to dump tons of rain. And then don't forget high winds. So it has more to do with whether your structure can withstand that, and we'll get to that. Let's talk about insurance. This becomes a huge topic as well. As everybody knows, a lot of the insurance providers have left Florida. There are still some local insurance companies that are still with us, and that these hurricanes and all the damage has really made our insurance skyrocket, and that prices a lot of people out of the area. And even if you're not in a flood zone, a lot of times people are going to have to go ahead and get flood insurance because you just never know. If you live near a retention pond, say, a girlfriend of mine who happens to live in Carrollwood, which is inland, and there was a retention pond in her backyard, which she loved. She loved having nature as her backdrop, right? Well, the storm came last year, and it dumped a lot of water into the retention pond, and guess where that water went? Into her backyard and into her house. So you just never really know how it's going to impact you. It's always my advice to talk to your insurance provider about flood insurance. What is the history of the home? Do you think it's going to need it? Is it near a body of water in any shape or form? You have to think about those things. So a good rule of thumb is to, when you're looking for houses in our area, whether you're working with another real estate agent or you're working with me, we're always going to be discussing the elevation of the home, the flood zone of the home, the area in general. I've lived here for 7 years now. I lived here as a kid and I came back. I live in the hot zone, flood zone wise. And so I have a lot of experience when it comes to hurricanes and flooding, and I can help you navigate what you need to know before you purchase a home. There are some things that we're going to look at as we're going through the home to determine whether we think it's potentially going to have flood. Has it had flood in the past? We have to really deep dive into it to know. But again, flooding and hurricanes could be a deterrent for you for Florida. So if you can't handle that, or if it's a little too scary for you, Florida may not be for you. Number 2, we kind of touched upon it, the rising insurance costs as well as the living costs here in Tampa. Let me tell you, when I moved here, again, I mentioned 7 years ago, I moved back to Tampa because the cost of living was so low. And the condo that I was able to purchase was right in my sweet spot of my budget. And I am so grateful for that. But after many years of being here and all of the influx of people moving here after COVID and all the spikes, and everybody, I don't have to tell you guys what happened here. You listen to the news. Well, our cost of living went up and our insurance went up, and the HOAs went up. And if you've been following me for a while, I have a problem with that. I have my own condo association here. The HOAs are just exorbitant. So these are things that you may or may not like, But if you're thinking about moving here, you have to really be open and honest with yourself about whether you can handle these things. So even though we're starting to see, as I record this video, a lot of the home prices are dipping and we're becoming a little bit more of a buyer's market, we're still seeing a rise in insurance premiums and property taxes and the HOAs, like I mentioned. And all of this is going to affect your affordability, right? And just so you know, there's an average of the homeowner's insurance anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000, and that is going to be dependent on the property and where it is, et cetera, et cetera. So I recommend that if there's a house that you're interested in, you speak to a lender, you reach out to me. I can help you with all of this as well. And you can kind of get a preliminary idea, a roundabout idea of what that insurance cost is going to be. So when you work with me and you work with my lender, we go through all of this together. We go through your budget. We talk about the insurance, whether you're in a flood zone or not, and we kind of, bulk all that together to give you one big number. That way you can determine whether that house is going to price you out of the market or you're going to be right where you need to be, right? And I always say too, when you're looking at even condos or anything that has an HOA, your budget might be $150,000, but if you're looking at HOAs, especially where we are landing right now, you need to lower that budget to accommodate having basically a second mortgage or half the amount of a mortgage. I've used myself as an example a lot. I have a very low mortgage. I bought my condo for $115,000, if you can believe, back in the day, and I have a water view. And my house payment is about $800 a month. Well, guess what my HOAs are? After 7 years of being here, as they've been creeping up and creeping up, they're right at $1,000. Yeah, let that sink in. Now, I have a seawall. I'm in a hot flood zone. So the HOA is covering all that. When you're a condo owner, you're responsible for everything from the studs in. The HOA handles the studs out. So the premiums have gone up for our flood insurance. So that's going to raise our HOAs. And there had to be some repairs after 2 back-to-back hurricanes. So that raises everything up. So if you don't have a little bit of wiggle room in your budget, you need to be very careful about going into a home purchase that has an HOA. And sadly, that means that Tampa is no longer the budget destination that it used to be. And that is making a lot of people mad. Rightfully so. People that have lived here for 10, 20, 30, 40 years even have noticed that their property insurance went from maybe $400, $800, all the way up to maybe $3,000. You can imagine somebody who's on a fixed income can't handle that kind of influx. So it's making Tampa extremely undesirable. I know for me that if I was getting ready to move here, I might reconsider, but I'm here now and I'm happy. So according to the Tampa Bay Business Journal, as of March of 2025, according to a study, a single adult requires an annual salary over $100,000 a year or an hourly wage close to almost $50 an hour to afford a comfortable lifestyle. The median household income currently is right at like 72 to 73K. Now that keeps rising every year. I check these stats yearly as I'm constantly talking to first-time home buyers and single people and those people that are wanting to come to the fun and sunshine and our fabulous state. And it still is a fabulous state, even though in the comments you might think differently. And this is an open forum, so give it to me. Let's educate each other on the good and the bad here, right? Because I think a lot of other channels are trying to sell you the sunshine, and that's great. And I love selling you sunshine, but I also want you to be happy here. And I don't want you to be calling me and asking me to sell your house because you're trying to leave, which I've had that happen, and it breaks my heart. So I'm here to give you the facts, okay? Sorry we're jumping around a little bit, but a lot of these issues kind of are bulked under the same topic. So I wanted to talk a little bit about FEMA, and they're updating the FEMA map. So you need to educate yourself on the FEMA map. I had a client ask me today, how do you know what zone you're in and where to evacuate? That is all going to be on the FEMA site. You can look at the FEMA map. It's going to show you where the hot zones, I call them the hot zones. They're going to be renaming them. So that's why I try not to say X or AE or VE. You're going to see those designations on the map, but they may be changing. Obviously, anything in the red is in the hot zone. I'm in the red hot zone. But as you go closer to water, obviously you're in the hot zone. As you go more inland, not so much. But as we know and we learned, unfortunately, with the last 2 hurricanes, that's not always the case. So again, as they're doing this remapping of the FEMA maps, I think they do this every so often depending upon what kind of storms we have. So some areas that weren't in high risk are now in high risk. So that's why it's always good to educate yourself with that FEMA map and to understand it. And then you can talk to me and I can help you navigate that as well. One other thing that you need to understand too, especially working with a local real estate agent and when you work with me, is we're always going to ask for that elevation certificate. And that's going to be something that we give to your insurance provider because again, higher elevation, the better you're going to sit when it comes time to navigate these storms and odd weather conditions, right? So elevation of the home is really important and getting that elevation certificate is also very important. And as of recording this video, let's talk about the shifting of our market. If you've been watching our market for a while or you've been in it, you know that we've been in a slow decline, rightfully so, because we were inflated, as I mentioned, during the peak of COVID. Bidding wars are a thing of the past. We're seeing more price reductions and we're seeing houses stay on the market longer. And that I think is because buyers out in the world are educating themselves more. They're taking their time. These are big purchases, homes, right? Probably the biggest purchase of your life. And so you want to take your time, you want to understand the market, and you want to make sure that you are getting also the value back in your home after, let's say, 5 to 7 years, depending on how long you want to live in that house. So there are some problems with that right now. Oh, and let's not forget interest rates. I know interest rates are such a huge thing and we're not seeing them budge at all right now. Again, we always have our fingers crossed that the Feds throws us a bone and eventually the interest rates will be lowered. But I also like to tell people and my clients as well is, we can buy down some rates. We can ask for that as part of our strategy, our buying strategy. But also when those rates lower, you can refinance. So again, as I've said in other videos, marry the house, date the rate. And let's talk about those short-term equity gains. We're not seeing the equity gains that we've had in the past. I've run into this with a couple of clients as well. One in particular, they bought at the height of COVID, a brand new construction home. It was an inflated price. They were relocating. So, they did with the best they could. They decided that wasn't the area they wanted to live in. They wanted to go somewhere else. And they didn't want to be house poor, which is everybody's concern, right? But now, because of the way that the market is going, they don't have enough equity in their house to lower that price in order to move. So they have to wait it out. So you have to balance that out as well with our market. This is about, being smart and not rushing into a market and understanding the market before you really get involved in it because it's ever changing, wouldn't you say? And now we have a whole new thing we have to be aware of when we're looking at homes. Storm damage. So there's a new law that passed that requires all listings to provide a document stating whether they had FEMA support or not. Did they have damage or not? And also, don't forget those sellers' property disclosures are super important. That's the first thing I look at when a client is asking me, "Oh, I really love this house." I was like, "Let me go look at those property disclosures. Let's see, did they flood?" Just because a house flooded, as again, we live in Florida, if the house is 20, 30, 40, 50 years old, it might have had some flood damage of any kind. And so that has to be stated in those property disclosures. But if you are now looking at a home that's close to the water that potentially had 3, 4, 5 feet of damage, we have to see, was that remediated? Did they come in there and fix any mold? Should we get a mold report? Having that be part of our inspection report. Do we have a normal inspection? And then do we hire someone to come in and check for mold as well? Again, I recommend that if they were in the hot zone. So this is another thing you have to consider when you're looking to buy homes. What kind of damage could it have had, even if it wasn't in a hot zone? Like I mentioned, my friend in Carrollwood, that house is in the central part of town. So we just don't know. So do not assume a house did not have storm damage, water damage, or any sort of damage from any sort of water intrusion just because it's inland, okay? We're gonna do a little bit of a deep dive, not a little bit, a big deep dive when you're working with me. So I'll make sure to check all those little nooks and crannies for you. Another problem that we've noticed is our international tourism has dropped. We noticed these numbers have shifted according to the first quarter of the year data. Now, our domestic tourism, interestingly enough, is still staying about the same. We, as locals, have noticed there hasn't been as much traffic, and there's not that much traffic on the beaches like we normally have, especially our spring break. So whether the data is showing it domestically or not, we still think there's been a slowing down, a cooling off of tourism to our state. That could change. It could just be, all the other factors that are going on, because again, it costs money to travel places. So it could have more to do with people's budgets than the area itself. But we are seeing some of those numbers shifting a little bit, but definitely internationally. And so what does that do? Jacks all the prices up. It's just the way that it works. So in an overall blanket statement about the cost of living, I will tell you from my personal experience, gas always fluctuates. I don't care where you live. Anywhere I've lived, I lived in LA where it was exorbitant, and I lived in Texas where it was like pennies. And then here where it's somewhere in the middle. It's anywhere, from $3.5, whatever. Personally, I have a hybrid car, and it has solved all those problems for me, especially being an agent and I drive all over town. But, gas is definitely a concern for people, especially my commuters. Groceries. I am, again, a single person. I was shopping with my mother, and she was shocked at how much it cost me just to buy my basics. She's like, and you're just one person. So I can't imagine. And my girlfriends that are married and such, they tell me how much they have an increase in their grocery bills lately. Not to mention some of our utilities are going up. And so again, these are those things I don't like to tell you, but I have to tell you because it's important to understand that you're not necessarily coming to the cheap market anymore. We are now sitting right about the national average. We are definitely not in the top 15 places that are more expensive, like Hawaii and that sort of place. We're not anywhere near there. I think because historically we've always been so low as far as cost of living, the fact that we're now more towards the national average, and I think we're creeping up a little bit now, it is a bit of a shock to most people that are really kind of, had been living a really nice life here, not being so affected by the ups and downs of the market. But again, a lot of people moved here, and that changed the landscape, unfortunately. So all in all, I think right now, like I said, as I'm recording this video, this is a buyer's market and there are deals to be made. Again, all of our buying strategies, hit me up if you want some information on that. I can absolutely help you. We're seeing all sorts of interesting things going on. So every season, our strategy shifts and we have to shift with the market. I think there's a little bit more leveling out that's going to happen in our market, but what we're all really hoping for is that our cost of living drops, but we'll see. I don't know. If you've got any information on that, I'd love to hear it below. And number 4 is we have limited public transportation. I don't think people realize that. And when you're looking at us on a map, it looks like everything's really close together. But then when you really go in, you can see, oh, no. You can't take a bus. I had a client once, you can't take a bus. Well, you could. Would you want to? A bus from Miami to Tampa and still be able to go see houses, it's just not conducive. There are things like the Bright Line, which runs, I think, from Orlando to Miami. That shaves a little bit of time off of your travel. But, when it comes to local transportation, we have a busing system. I'm not that familiar with it. I don't think it's that popular. We have like little trolleys downtown, and we have little, pick you up and drop you off. I think Uber and Lyft are taking over for the most part. But as far as like affordable public transportation, we're really suffering in that way. They keep talking about bringing it to our town. I don't know. They talk about doing it and then we don't hear about it for a couple of years. So if you're used to big cities with lots of public transportation, lots of options, you're just not going to get that here. You're going to need a car here, or you're going to have to live really close to everything. Like in St. Pete, if you're downtown St. Pete, you can get away with having an e-bike or one of those little electric scooters to bebop around. But if you're going to need any sort of big grocery shopping, or Best Buy, getting a TV or something like that, you're going to need a car. And especially if you want to go to the beach. Yes, can you Uber to the beach? Sure, but that's going to be quite a hefty Uber ticket, I'm not going to lie. In my opinion, traffic is one of the biggest downsides of our area. Yes, public transportation, but really there's so many drivers here and there's so many terrible drivers. It is like NASCAR on 275, our interstate here. And like I've said, I've lived in some major cities with tons more traffic than what we've got. We just don't have the infrastructure yet for it. They keep widening things. They're trying to widen things, like even the Howard Franklin, which is 275 that goes across over to St. Pete. They're expanding that. Hopefully they'll open those lanes soon. But just some of our streets, they're just 2-lane roads and you just get stuck, especially on the east side of town. So you have to be willing to sit in some traffic now. It took a while for that to kind of develop, of course, after COVID, but now it's pretty atrocious. And during school season, it's really bad. So luckily, a lot of us are working from home now, so we don't really have to be in traffic. But for those of you that have to sit in traffic to commute somewhere, you got to keep that in mind. It's not just, you can go, it could take you an hour and a half to do 20 miles. Not going to lie. And don't forget peak season. Snowbird season, which is November to April or May. That's when, again, an influx of people up north come down to enjoy the sunshine here. And then we've got spring break and then the summer. So that changes the traffic here as well. And it is nuts. And topic number 5 is just something you're just going to have to live with when you're here. And again, I was talking to some clients today about it, some people that are relocating, they're here looking at the area. And we were talking about the heat and humidity and sometimes the unbearable heat of the summer, right? We had an early hot summer this year. Don't know why, not a weatherman, but it's been atrocious. It's literally like a wall of humidity and a wall of heat hitting you. And that also brings the afternoon thunderstorms. And so we've had a lot of that. Usually every day right now, we're having some sort of rain shower somewhere in our area. That's good too. It cools things off. And obviously it's good for, the plants and the trees and the grass. So that's a good thing. It also washes away a lot of the pollen. We get a lot of pollen in the early part of the season. And sometimes what happens is it will rain and wash it away. And then the pollen comes back again. And it's this never ending cycle. Florida, hot, balmy all the time. I was asked, when is it cooler? Well, that depends on the year and what's going on with the weather patterns and everything. But I would say I notice it starting to cool down probably around October, November. And I'm saying cool down, meaning the humidity goes away, which is my favorite time. When the humidity's gone, it's like California weather. And that's when, again, is our big hurricane time, right? From October, what did I say? August to October? Yeah, that's about right. So October, the air gets cooler, the ocean water gets cooler. And so as that happens, we start to have our perfect time of year. So I'd say October, November to about February, March, April, depending on how soon we get heat. We started to get heat in March this year. So normally we have March to April to really kind of build up, and we didn't get that this year. But during those sweet months right in there, the holidays up into spring, some of the best time here, not gonna lie. And the last little bit I'm gonna talk about here are the bugs. I've talked about it on other videos before. And again, it's so funny. A lot of these topics I was talking about with my clients today. And behind me in the window was this huge cricket. It was a cricket, this big. And they're like, is that a cricket? Yes, it was a cricket. Our bugs are big and there's a lot of them. And you get a lot of what I call no-see-ums, and you can get them in your house, fruit flies, all sorts of things. So you kind of have to get to the point where bugs don't bother you that much. And pest control is going to be your friend. I'm literally friends with my pest control person because they're here a lot. You need them. And especially when it rains, those little critters are looking for a place to go. So bugs, yeah, just got to deal with it. All right, so our 6th topic, reasons why you might not want to move here, is the neighborhoods and some of the denser parts of these suburban areas. Things can be really close together. Houses are really close together in a lot of neighborhoods. And not all neighborhoods look great. This is just the deal here. We don't have a ton of HOAs unless you're in old master plan communities or the newer master plan communities where they require an HOA because they want all of the lawns to look great, which is understandable. And there's some deed restricted areas where there's a nominal yearly fee for the upkeep of that neighborhood. So it just depends. But, again, as I've mentioned on this channel, you'll see, you can be on a block that's really beautiful. And then across the street, it doesn't look so great. That doesn't mean it's a bad area. It doesn't mean that it's It's a crime-ridden area. It's just that Florida is old. Tampa is old. And these areas have not had a lot of revamp until recently. And I think the good side of COVID was that because it brought so many people here, that the people that require a little bit, let's just say nicer neighborhoods or nicer homes, the builders are starting to create communities based on that need. And so we do have that. We do have those new construction communities that have all of the bells and whistles that you want and the latest and greatest features. But that's not going to be in Tampa proper. And that's not going to necessarily be close to the beach. So again, I've had to have those conversations with my clients about, St. Pete is a really great, fun area, but the neighborhoods don't look that great. Not every neighborhood looks alike. And your neighbor may not keep up their lawn, but the neighbor next door to you may have an award-winning landscape lawn, So you have to decide, is that going to be a make it or break it for you? As far as crime, I cannot tell you that. You have to go and do your own research on crime ratings and that sort of thing. But I've lived in some larger cities, and I'm going to tell you I've never felt unsafe in Tampa as a single woman. So take that into consideration. But I think you have to understand areas like Seminole Heights and Ybor City and West Tampa, they're going to have that more of an urban feel. Now they're building all around it. So there's really great things to do in all of those areas. But then you go up north to Wesley Chapel, and it's its own city now. And it's very beautiful, and it's spread out, and you've got land, but you are nowhere near the ocean. You are near nature. So if that's your thing, that's where you need to go. Normal shopping, big box stores. They've got some really great restaurants up there too. So each area of town really offers something different. It just depends on what your needs are. That's why it's very important that you work with a local agent. Again, I'm a relocation specialist. This is why people come to me and they call me. And like my clients that I met with today, they're in town. What we're doing first is we're searching areas. So I help them with a map, and we navigate areas for them to go look at. We've ticked some things off the list that they said, no, we don't like those areas. Great. So here's the next areas I think you should go take a look at. And while they're here, they're going to look around. And then after that, we're going to come back together, and then we're going to decide what areas we focus on, right? So you really need to come here. You need to dive into these communities, especially the ones that you might be seeing on YouTube, because remember, on YouTube, they're going to make them look so shiny and pretty, right? But you got to go in and see if that is a vibe for you first, because if it's not, Tampa just may not be for you, and you need to know that before you make such a big purchase. And topic number 7, which can be a little controversial, but I decided to go ahead and put it here because why not? You guys will comment below all of your opinions, I know. And again, this is an open forum, so have at it. Our Florida political landscape and cultural landscape has gone through some major shifts. And for some people, that's a deal breaker. Now, some people would say Tampa leans more moderate, and I would say that's probably accurate. There are parts of town that are more conservative and parts of town that are more liberal, and there's a little bit of mix in between. I'll be honest with you, I've lived here a long time now, almost 8 years, and I find that I interact with all sorts of different political views, right? As you all know, there's lots of controversy here about all sorts of topics between our healthcare, LGBTQ rights, immigration. I mean, the list can go on. And so whether you love it or not, agree with it or not, it is something that you have to understand as part of potentially the good or the bad of living here, right? So if you're moving from a more progressive state, it could be a little bit of a culture shock here. So it's important to know where your values lie and what regions might be more conducive to making a long-term move for yourself. Let's say it that way. Okay. That's really all I'm going to say on that. But I do like to bring that up because I think there is a misconception of the whole state of Florida. And when you're talking about Tampa, St. Pete, we are a little bit different than the whole state. So we're a little bit moderate. I'll just leave it at that. And of course, along with some of the negatives, you always have to throw in some positives, right? We have a growing job market here. We're becoming a tech hub. And so it's like 30% growth that we're seeing. There's all these new wonderful developments happening all over our city. Again, they're working on the infrastructure. we're working on things. We're not where we need to be. We're a little bit behind the eight ball, but I do believe that Tampa and St. Pete are doing their best to try to make our cities enjoyable for all, right? And as you probably know, we are a no state income state. So that helps. That saves you thousands of dollars every year. So that is, to me, a bonus of living here. And you've got like 240 plus days of sunshine. Vitamin D goes a long way. You tend to have a happier existence when you're around sunshine, as you well know. And the fact that you can get in the water or do any sort of water sports pretty much year round, there's maybe a couple of months where it's too cold. It's just ideal. And I think that's why a lot of people gravitated to our state during COVID when everybody was kind of locked up. And so we were not. As I like to joke, we didn't participate in the pandemic, even though we did a little bit. But, we had the ability to get outside more and not have the levels of depression and anxiety that everybody had when it came to, having to hibernate based on all that was going on. And we don't need to get into that. But I don't have to tell you, because if you've been looking at Florida at all and you've visited our state, you know how great it is here. But we always have to look at the negative on top of it before you make any sort of big jump anywhere, whether it's Tampa, whether it's another city. Just make sure you do your due diligence. So, should you move to Tampa? I guess it's really going to depend on your lifestyle, your budget, and, what you value. Tampa offers real opportunity, but it comes with a downside as well. So you have to figure out if that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing for you. Do the pros outweigh the cons? That's really up to you. So if I haven't talked you out of Tampa yet and you're still looking to relocate, you need to contact me. So the best thing to do is go into my description and click on my calendar link where you can book a relocation call with me, and we can go over all of your concerns. We can talk about your budget. We can talk about areas. We go over all of it. And so I'd love to hear from you. And I hope this video was helpful. And if it did deter you, hey, I hope it saved you money. But if it actually made you want to move here, I'm looking forward to talking to you. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.